Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show. Now, if you've watched my show for any length of time, you know that I'm no big fan of the Federal Reserve and the Ponzi scheme that the bankers originally, when they set up the Federal Reserve. They went to a place called Jekyll Island, and they set it up, and it was actually ingenious. It was set up as a Ponzi scheme. The Federal Reserve was privately owned by private banks and institutions, and the very name that they picked, Federal Reserve, makes it sound like it's part of the federal government, when the real truth is it's actually about as federal as Federal Express. You know? Now, I'm no big fan of the Federal Reserve. But the Federal Reserve is the reason why Bitcoin is going to grow so big. It's the entity that's going to save us from something that would be completely disastrous and utterly abysmal. If the system were to totally melt down, I cannot begin to describe to you the consequences that would happen if the financial system totally melted down. Basically, everything would come to a grinding stop because everything runs on money. There's nothing in our economy that doesn't run on money. And if we went back to the 1930s, the Great Depression, that wasn't a complete stop of the system. That was a slowdown. It was an enormous slowdown, but it wasn't a complete stop. Commerce continued. I had a friend who lived through the Great Depression. He was an old man when he was a friend of mine. We used to go fishing together, and we used to talk a lot, And he told me how he not only survived during the Great Depression, but he explained to me how he actually thrived. What happened was he was out of work like everyone else, and he was going to enter into the mess that everyone else was entering into, where their bellies were basically going to go without food. I mean, this is a serious situation. And so there was a company back then called Pep Boys. And they were hiring. And jobs were so scarce during the Great Depression that he went to get a job there. And I think they were going to hire like 3 different men or 2 different men. And when he got there was a big long line from the front door of the building. They were all waiting for the building to open up so they could be interviewed. There was a line that quite literally extended down the block and around the block. So he walked up and he shook his head and he said to himself, this is hopeless. I'm never going to get this job. It's a good job too, It was a window decorator for Pep Boys. A guy goes in behind the glass and sets everything up and everything, right? So he was very smart. He said to himself, by the time I get to that end of the line, by the time I get to the door, I'll be waiting here all day long, and the positions will have been filled. So he didn't give up. He didn't give up. This is the big point. He didn't give up. He went around the back of the building to the other side of the building, to where the employees enter and stuff. And he went inside the building like he was an employee, and he asked somebody, "Where's the boss?" Now, they were waiting to open up. They hadn't opened the store yet, quite. They're getting ready to open up and interview all these people. They said, that's the boss's, that's over there. That's the boss's, that's where he is. The boss is over there, they said. So he went over there, right? And he opened up the door, and the boss was sitting behind him. He sat right down in front of the boss in the chair. The boss said, "Who are you? Who are you?" And he said, I'm the guy that's come to interview for the job. Okay, you're the guy come to interview. Do you have any experience? And he says, well, not really. He says, but I'm really good at stuff and I learn really quick and everything, And George, that's the guy that was interviewing for the job. He had his hair all nice and neat and combed, and he had on a nice suit, you know, he looked neat and presentable and everything else, you know, and the boss looked him up and down, you know, and the boss asked him a few questions, and he seemed like he was very intelligent, and he looked young and healthy and strong, and he was nice, cleanly dressed. So, you know what he said? He said, "You got the job." The job paid $40 a week. Now, during the Great Depression, $40 a week was like, this is why they were all lined up around the block. $40 a week. Can you imagine? Most people were only making $1 a day, you know, in the Great Depression. So George told me, he said that he worked, and he said, "I live like a king. Nice apartment, all the best food you can eat, gas from my car, paid for everything. Everything was paid for $20 a week. Took $20 a week of my salary." He said, "The other $20, he said, I'd go out and I'd buy 20 from the bank." He actually didn't buy them. He just, back then, the bank, that's what they had for dollars. I think they were Morgan silver dollars. Anyway, he'd get these silver dollars, put them in a sock. An old dirty sock, and throw them under his bed. 20 silver dollars every week. And he did that all the way through the Great Depression. Well, time went by. And when I knew George, he was an old man. You know? And he was still living on those. He used the money from the Great Depression to build a house later. He sold that house and he built another house. You know? And what he was able to do is, between the silver and building houses and selling houses and stuff, he was able to live his life, you know, on that investment, because silver went way up in price. He was smart. He was smart. I think he got Social Security too, but you know, he was able to retire and live a pretty good retirement on between his money he got from his house he sold and the silver and also his Social Security, and he lived pretty good. You know, he really enjoyed his retirement years. He used to love to go fishing. He used to go fishing free maybe 4 times a week. Fishing was his big thing. He really loved. Anyway, so that was a depression, and that was a real economic slowdown. But what we're talking about here is a system that's so over-leveraged. Unlike the Great Depression, they leveraged for 10 years. They leveraged the system up. It was just before the Great Depression. And during those 10 years, they used an awful lot of things to pump the stock market up. Does that sound familiar, guys? But this time it's worse. This time they've levered the system instead of 10 years. Now those were called the Roaring 20s, the years they levered the system. 10 years they levered the system. And it was the Federal Reserve that levered the system. This time they've levered it for 30 years. This time the whole world is leveraged. So when it crashes this time, it is going to be more than just a slowdown. It's going to be a meltdown. That is, if the Federal Reserve doesn't step in and stop it. They're the only thing that stands between us and a total meltdown of the system. So what does a total meltdown look like in the system? Well, back in the 1930s, when the system slowed down considerably, and it was like a meltdown, but not as bad, people had a different mindset. They're out through the country. You could go anywhere out in the country, and people were very helpful. And most of these small farms in the countryside would have their own means of food production. They only had to go into the store like once a month for maybe sugar, flour, you know, just a few necessities. Everything else they'd produce on the farm. Milk they'd produce on the farm. Eggs they would produce on the farm. Now, when you watch the movie, The Great Wizard of Oz, you can see an example of this. Dorothy goes back to the farm, right? And her mom and pa are there, and they're putting the chickens away or whatever. Well, the brooder or whatever wasn't working right, and they're trying to save the chicks, you know. When she goes back to the farm, there's 3 guys there that's working at the farm, 3 hired hands. Well, they're not really hired hands. What they are is hobos that were walking down the road and didn't have nothing to eat from the Great Depression, and they took them in and fed them if they would work on the farm. That's what was going on in that movie. You know, later in the movie, they became the Tin Man, the Cowardly Lion, and the Straw Man. But those were the three hired hands that was working on the farm, repairing things and doing everything else. Those were hobos, and this happened all across America. It became legendary, the hobo carrying the knapsack over his shoulder and riding the train system out into the country looking for work or food. Looking for food because there's no food in the city in the Great Depression. That's a slowdown. A meltdown is much, much worse, magnitudes worse. And we live in a society now where we don't have those small farms anymore dotting the countryside. Now all we got is giant conglomerates that run on diesel fuel. So there's nowhere to go. And the cities are 10 times more populated now. So a total meltdown of the system would break down the fabric of society. And the only thing standing between us and a total meltdown is money creation. And the only ones out there that can actually create these voluminous amounts of money is the Federal Reserve. So the very system that they've set up that causes the problem, they end up being the only solution. But in fact, they are not really a solution, because ultimately in the end game, the amount of money that they would have to generate in order to stave this off or stop this or even slow this down, this has just begun. We're looking at what they just did with the repo market. I heard it, by the time they're done, it's going to be $400 billion that they just injected into the system. But that just shows you which direction they're going to go in when things start to melt down. At least I'm hoping that's the direction they're going to go in. And I'm almost certain that that's the direction that they're going to go in. I can't say with 100% surety, and the reason why I can't say with 100% surety is you cannot tell for 100% what another person's going to do, or another group is going to do, or or the Fed's going to do. You cannot tell with 100% certainty. But I'm about 99.9% sure that this is what they're going to do, that they're going to keep injecting liquidity into the system to support the system as the system starts to melt down in the areas where the liquidity is needed. And the amount of liquidity that we're talking here that they're going to have to inject into the system in order to keep the stock market propped up, in order to keep all these things running, is going to start to tip us toward inflation and then later hyperinflation. This is going to create a lack of confidence in the purchasing power of the fiat currencies. And this is going to be the big driver for cryptocurrency. It's also going to be the big driver for gold and silver. I believe that gold is going to be the very first recipient of this wealth transfer, because that's what it really is, guys. It's actually a wealth transfer from the fiat monetary system that was set up as a Ponzi scheme to begin with, and all Ponzi schemes fail in the end. This one's going to fail in a hyperinflation, and at the end of the hyperinflation, be prepared for a reset. Now, we're going to talk about the reset a little bit when we get to that point. Toward the end of the hyperinflation, when the dollar is going down rapidly in flames, the Federal Reserve is going to do a reset. And I'm not exactly sure what form that reset's going to take, but I think that it's going to be moving from the dollars we have now into a new dollar. And I think the new dollar is going to be cryptographic, and it's going to run on your phone, and it's going to be very similar to blockchain technology. It's going to be in that vein, in that same line. It's going to be very similar to what China, the People's Bank of China, is doing right now. They're doing it right now. They're already doing this over in China. And, you know, it's all the rage now for central banks to switch over into a digital currency. So I believe they're going to switch over into a digital currency. But by that time, the dollar is going to be down really low in price. So when they reset into this new currency that they're going to create, which is probably not here yet, it's probably going to be coming in the future. When they flip over into that new currency, they're probably going to give you like 90 days to transfer your money into the new digital money. But the thing is they're not going to give you dollar for dollar, because the old dollars then will be worth like very little. Be the sort of thing where you go out and you buy one apple, and it's not $1 for an apple, it's like $100 for one apple, sort of a thing. When we get to that point where a dozen eggs costs you like $89 or something like that, really massive amount of money, you know, and silver is riding high. It's maybe $500 or $600 an ounce or whatever, you know. But when we get to that point, and by the way, silver and gold is going to retain your purchasing power where nothing else will. Your bank account by then, say you got $10,000 in the bank, well, they'll transfer it over into these new dollars, and they'll be giving you like just a measly amount. I'm not going to try to figure out how much to give you. Maybe $30 or something for your money that you got in the bank when you transfer it over into the new dollars. But suddenly the new dollars will have good purchasing power, kind of like our old dollars do now. You know, these new dollars. But what's that going to do is it's going to take all these people who have invested in dollar-denominated assets, including treasury bonds. This is what the reset's going to do. And it's going to give you a depreciated value for all of these things. So in other words, if you've got a portfolio right now that's worth $1 million, but it's all in things like U.S. treasuries and in stocks and in mutual funds and everything else, and all these different monetary products that are connected to the dollar, they're all going to go down together. So then when you have the reset comes and you have to transfer those funds over to the new dollars, your $1 million is going to turn into like $30,000. And that's your retirement savings. Suddenly you're going to find that you can't retire on $1 million anymore, because now it's turned into $30,000. This is what it's going to do to the middle class. It's going to ultimately destroy the middle class. It's going to set them back so far. And, you know, you can thank all of this to the Federal Reserve. But, at the same time, what is this going to do to cryptocurrencies? Because this loss of faith in the fiat currencies, and that's what they're doing. When they do this to the middle class, and they basically take your savings away, they're also destroying your faith in them. So now, if your faith is destroyed in them and their monetary system, what is your escape route? What's your way out? Well, there's not very many ways out. There's only gold, silver, and Bitcoin, or cryptocurrencies. Gold, silver, and cryptocurrencies. And so, because everybody's going to lose faith in the present monetary system, these three things, the wealth is going to transfer into them. Everybody's going to want it. Just look at Venezuela. Look at Venezuela. What's happened there is the people are going after Bitcoin. And they're going after gold, and they're going after silver. I mean, for a handful of silver in Venezuela right now, you can buy a house. Because a lot of people have moved the heck out. They don't even want to be there anymore. You know? There's a lot of vacant homes. We got troubling times coming. It's getting ready to start very soon. And as much as I don't like the Federal Reserve, they're the only thing that's standing between us and an actual total meltdown is their injection of money. This is the direction that they're going to go. They're going to inject the system with money, but this is going to destroy the middle class, and this is going to really prop up the price of the three asset classes Bitcoin, gold, and silver. This is coming. I can't give you a guaranteed date of when it's coming. All I can tell you is soon. Bye-bye, guys.